I'm Skylar Whitaker, and today I'm going to talk about what we can do to help create more caring workplace cultures. I want to do two things here. First, I want to give you what I hope will be practical tools, resources, and strategies that can get you started on doing this wherever it is you work. But I also want to just start a broader conversation about these ideas, because I'm hoping that the more we figure out how to do this for our own workplaces, the more we can work to create a more caring society overall. So, why is this so important? Because culture determines everything about what kind of work gets done and how it gets done, who does it, when, where, and how they do it, and in particular, why they do it. So let's talk about why we do work. What is the purpose of our work? Well, from a biological evolutionary perspective, the purpose of work is to meet human needs. This is why we have organized human societies in the first place, because people figured out that if they worked together to organize labor to help meet everybody's needs, they'd all have a better chance of survival. And I think it's really important to remember that, because humans are biological organisms with natural physical limitations. Each one of us only has the capacity to do so much work. So it's important to make sure the work we're doing is actually helping us survive, that our work is actually meeting people's actual needs. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time and energy and resources. So whose needs are we talking about? Well, everybody's. Because when people are getting their needs met, they're going to have a greater capacity to help meet other people's needs. Whereas when they're not getting their needs met, that means they're not going to be able to do as good of a job. When we as a society fail to meet someone's needs, we are actively preventing that person from being able to do their best work. So it's like a snowball effect. The more work we can do to help meet everyone's needs, the more everyone's needs can get met. And this includes your needs. You're a person too. The more you can figure out ways to meet your needs and other people's needs, the more that's going to benefit everybody all around. Sounds simple, right? Of course, a lot of us know it's not actually that simple. Meeting real people's real needs is both a delicate art and in many ways a complex science that requires a whole lot of knowledge and skill and expertise in order to do it successfully. So, let's talk about care work, what it is, and what it takes to do this work well. So what's care work? Well, it's been defined in different ways by different people, but here's my definition. As you can see, it's a pretty broad category. There's a lot of work that goes into sustaining people and communities and their various activities. So there are a lot of different tasks that can be considered care work. But basically, care work is the foundation of all work. No work can get done without somebody somewhere taking care of the workers and making sure they have the time and space and resources they need in order to do their work. And this is why care work should be everybody's business, no matter what industry or field you're working in. Because every organization, every community, and every individual person has to depend on someone's care work in order to function. If nobody did any care work, society would collapse and humans would go extinct pretty quickly. I'm just saying. So, let's talk about how this work gets done. So when you think about meeting people's needs, maybe you're thinking about their physical needs for food, water, shelter, medical care, and so on. But people also have cognitive needs and emotional needs, which, in a way, are also physical needs, because the brain is a physical organ that is part of the body, and emotions are physical reactions that are felt in the body. So these aren't really three separate categories. They're more like three different dimensions of what our bodies need in order to function well within our environment. And different people are going to have different needs, because different people's bodies and brains work differently, and are affected by different environmental conditions at different times and places. And even a single person isn't going to have the same needs all the time. They might have some needs that stay relatively consistent, but other needs might change rapidly from day to day or even moment to moment, and people's bodies and brains are naturally going to change as they get older, as their circumstances change, as they have new life experiences. Needs are not static. Our needs are fluid and changing because reality itself is fluid and changing. So, just like our needs have physical, cognitive, and emotional dimensions, our work is also going to have physical, cognitive, and emotional dimensions. And different people are going to have different abilities and different capacities to do different kinds of work. And people's abilities are also fluid and changing. Sometimes they can change rapidly, without warning. Human bodies and brains can be very unpredictable, and we've got to be prepared for that. We should expect that fluctuations in people's abilities are going to happen, and design our organizational systems and structures to be flexible and resilient and adaptable enough to handle it. So how do we do that? Through an iterative process of trial and error. You are dealing with messy organic human bodies and brains, and this is gonna be a messy organic evolutionary process. It can't happen any other way. So understand that you, your organization, and all the people and communities it's connected to are all complex evolving systems. And these systems are actually co-evolving together as they continually interact with one another in a constantly changing information environment. Because everything's part of a larger interconnected information ecosystem. And anything that happens in one part of that system has the potential to affect what goes on in other parts. And different parts of the system can work together constructively or destructively, so keep that in mind. So a caring workplace culture is something that you as a human will have to co-design with the other humans at your workplace. You'll need to get their input and their buy-in so you can all start figuring out together how to create the best working experience for everybody. And this is gonna take some trial and error. You're not gonna get everything right on the first try. You're not going to know everything you need to know starting out. You'll have to figure out most of it as you go. But we can draw some lessons from the field of user experience design, because that's all about how to design information systems and technologies to effectively respond to the real needs of real people. And when we're talking about creating a caring culture, a culture is basically a social information system. This is information systems design right here. So we want to make sure our cultural information systems are practically useful and make people's lives easier and not harder. So definitely make sure you're familiar with the principles of universal design and universal design for learning, because those will give you a starting point for making a lot of people's lives easier. But it's also important to put all this in the context of specific people's lived experiences, starting with the people you work with and interact with on a regular basis. What's their perspective? What struggles do they face? What strategies have they been using to cope with these struggles? What could potentially make their lives easier? So with that in mind, I want to talk about sense-making, which is an approach to studying human information behavior that focuses on these exact questions. It comes from Brenda Dervin's work in communication studies and in library and information science. But I think these ideas are important and relevant for people in any field or industry, not only in terms of information systems design, but also just for understanding human communication and behavior more generally. Because really, all behavior is information behavior. We all make choices based on the information we encounter as we go about our daily lives, which involves our bodies moving through time and space. And the basic idea behind sense-making is that we're all trying to find information that helps us bridge gaps in our understanding of reality, that helps us make more sense of the parts of our experience that currently don't make sense. Of course, this doesn't always happen. Sometimes what happens is sense unmaking. We get new information that totally messes up what we thought we knew about the world, and now everything makes even less sense. But basically, sense-making research looks at when and where and how people encounter different kinds of information as they move toward a particular goal or objective, and how that information impacts them. Does it help them? Does it hurt them? Maybe it helps in some ways and hurts in others. This is all important to know, because ideally, in our workplaces, we'd like to minimize what hurts people and maximize what helps people. So, what have sense-making researchers found out? Well, they found that people's sense-making behavior is very much shaped and constrained by social power dynamics, and these power dynamics often get in the way of people's ability to share the sense they've made of their experiences with each other, basically creating barriers to meaningful communication. So if we really want to understand how other people make sense of information and how they experience the world, we need to be willing to address these kinds of power dynamics and make it safer for people to talk about them. Because remember, you're going to have to co-design your workplace culture with the other people at your workplace. So it's going to help if everybody feels like they have their own power and agency in that process, and that their individual perspectives and contributions are respected and valued. And so if anyone doesn't feel respected and valued, you're going to want to know that. So you need to make it safe for them to let you know that, and normalize having open, honest conversations about these issues. So, let's dig a little deeper now. Let's see what other people have to say about what can potentially get in the way of creating a caring organizational culture. So Joan Tronto is a political science professor who's done a lot of research on care work, and she also talks about power dynamics and the problems that can happen when you have one-sided power relationships between caregivers and care receivers. Caregivers can develop a paternalistic attitude of, I know your needs better than you do, I'm doing this for your own good because I know what's best for you. And they can also fall into the trap of parochialism, where they prioritize caring for the people they like and are close to, while giving lower quality care to people they don't know or understand as well. Tronto also came up with this list of 7 signs that an institution or organization is providing bad care. First, there's this idea that misfortune causes the need for care, so that care receivers are basically viewed as pity objects, and needing care itself is seen as something negative that people should generally want to avoid. Secondly, the organization itself acts as the primary authority on what people's needs are and how those needs should get met, and then tries to impose that framework on the people who receive care. So again, you have paternalism. You have care being treated like a commodity or a product instead of a process. You have care receivers who are excluded from making decisions about their own care, which is also paternalism in action. You have care being seen only in terms of caregiving, which I think is related to seeing care as a commodity, as a thing that one person can just give to another person on a one-time basis, without considering how this fits into a broader complex web of social relations and interactions. You have care workers feeling like the organization's requirements are getting in the way of them actually doing their job well. And finally, you have an unequal distribution of care work within the organization, where the frontline workers who do the bulk of the actual labor tend to come from more marginalized social and economic classes, and those people don't generally get a lot of say in how they do their work, while the administrators who make all the decisions behind the scenes and don't have to interact directly with clients on a day-to-day basis tend to be disproportionately white, disproportionately male, and disproportionately from economically and socially privileged families. So, let's talk a little more about the gender dynamics of care work. We're going to talk about feminized labor, and then we'll talk about feminist care ethics and how it can be useful for addressing social power inequities in general. So what's feminized labor? Well, it includes the domestic work that's often, but not always, done by women, either in their own home for free or done for other people for really low pay, because it's seen as unskilled labor. And it also includes what are known as the helping professions, which tend to be relatively not that well paid either. People don't generally go into these jobs for the money. These are all things that have historically been viewed in our culture, and in some other cultures as well, as women's work. It's very important work. Society could not function without people doing this work, and yet, the people doing it don't always get a lot of credit or respect or even support, even though all these jobs take a considerable amount of physical, mental, and emotional energy. So why is this? Well, it's complicated. A lot of it has to do with cultural narratives in our society around gender, and how dominant standards of moral behavior are, in many ways, tied to this culturally masculine ideal of a lone heroic individual conquering the world with his superior intellect and independent will, whereas qualities that are seen as more feminine, like caregiving and emotionality, don't always figure into that equation. And in some cases, they're even seen as morally suspect. And I'm specifically talking about Western society and the dominant culture in the United States. Other cultures have their own complicated gender dynamics that may or may not follow this pattern. And keep in mind that what's considered masculine and what's considered feminine is always going to be culturally defined, because gender itself is culturally defined, and it's actually been defined differently by different cultures at different times. I'm a non-binary trans person, so I could rant about this forever, but I won't, because we have other important things to talk about. Because this whole dynamic doesn't only happen along the gender binary within Western culture, it also exists between white Western culture and other cultures that do place more value on interconnectedness and community, where those cultures are also seen as less moral because they have different values and priorities from white Western patriarchy. And of course, this has historically been used as a justification for colonizing and exploiting those other cultures and stealing their resources, and in some cases, for trying to wipe them out entirely. I actually made a video on this topic if you want to learn more about it, and plenty of other people have also been talking about this, and about how a lot of different forms of oppression and discrimination are related and actually have common historical roots. So do your research, because all this is really important in terms of creating more caring organizations. So now let's talk about care ethics, which is a framework that feminist scholars came up with to try to counteract the dominant narratives of morality and ethics centered around Western masculinity and its idealized myth of the autonomous, rational, independent self. Care ethics acknowledges that humans are naturally interdependent and relational creatures, and that the relationships we have with one another very often are unequal in terms of power. So what do we do about that? What kind of work do we need to do to bring more balance and reciprocity into our social relationships and into our political decision-making? So basically, care ethics is all about acknowledging the interconnectedness of everyone's needs, and about taking shared responsibility for meeting those needs, and reducing harm and suffering to as many people as we possibly can. Which are not exactly new ideas. They're similar to the cultural values of a lot of indigenous societies who've historically organized themselves around collective land management and environmental stewardship, as opposed to private exclusive land ownership. These just haven't been valued within the dominant culture that has shaped our institutional and organizational practices here in the United States. And that means they haven't been valued in tech culture, because tech culture grew out of that dominant culture. Technology is not and has never been neutral. Its design is always shaped by particular cultural values and cultural norms. So it's important to think about whose cultural norms and whose cultural values our technologies and our workplaces are currently promoting, versus whose values we actually want them to promote. We can totally reorganize tech culture around different values if we want to. It'll just take some time and effort. And I think we really do need to start reorganizing the tech industry around care ethics as quickly as possible, because the helping professions need help. Seriously. We really need to prioritize designing information systems that make it easier for all kinds of institutions and organizations and community groups to collaborate and share knowledge and resources with each other so they can work together to help meet everybody's needs. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is a life or death issue. The lives and well-being of real people are at stake. The longer we wait to start making these changes, the more widespread tragedy and suffering we're going to end up seeing. We're seeing this already with the COVID-19 crisis. This is showing us the design flaws in our existing cultural information systems and institutional structures, and we need to get to work on designing better systems that can give more people a better chance of surviving and thriving. So with that being said, we talked before about what bad care looks like, so now let's talk about what good care looks like. So Miriam Sweeney and Colin Rhinesmith came up with these guidelines for good care, to contrast with Tronto's list of signs of bad care. So instead of care being something that only the less fortunate need, we can just say that everyone needs care, that it's natural and normal and human to need care, and all of us deserve to be given the care we need. Instead of the organization defining what people's needs are from the outset, we can take time to learn about the particular context of each person's situation, and then work with that person to figure out what they really need and how we can best help them. We can see care as an ongoing process instead of a commodity or a service. We can see expertise as something that's distributed and situated instead of something that's invested in particular individual authority figures. We can see expertise as something that's situated and distributed within and across different contexts, instead of something that only comes from particular authority figures. Different people are going to have different forms of expertise in different contexts and situations, and each person will have a lot of expertise when it comes to their own needs and their own lived experiences. We can see care as more than just a simple transaction between a caregiver and a care receiver. We can see it as a relational process that involves each person fluidly assuming a variety of roles and responsibilities over time in the ongoing giving and receiving of care. We can see care as a routine part of every aspect of professional practice, so that care work gets naturally integrated into all work. And finally, we can see care work as a shared responsibility, and work together to make sure that responsibility gets equitably distributed. So basically, it's important to keep asking these kinds of questions about who is doing the care work, about who's benefiting from that care work and who isn't, and who's seen as having the knowledge and expertise and authority to determine how that work gets done. So how can we apply this to our own workplaces? How can we use these ideas from feminist care ethics to create more caring work cultures? Well, remember that it's not about what gender you are personally. Feminism is not about idealizing women over other genders. At least it shouldn't be. It's really about making sure power and labor is being equitably distributed, and that nobody is being exploited or devalued or harmed because of their gender or for any other reason. So in the workplace, as much as anywhere else, everybody's got a responsibility to help with care work, to the extent that their individual bodies and brains can do that work sustainably. At the same time, each person should get to have choices about what kind of work they do, and be able to negotiate when and where and how they do it. And workers also need to take care of each other and make sure people's work isn't making them miserable or burning them out. They need to help each other remember to take care of themselves and to not push themselves too hard. Because our well-being is tied up in each other's well-being, and that means we need to keep on taking care of ourselves and each other. And that means paying attention to our own and other people's feelings, and taking those feelings seriously as carriers of important information. It might take some time to figure out what kind of information and why it's important, but it's worth the effort. Because if you ignore people's feelings, sooner or later you're going to end up with a lot of problems on your hands. Feelings are feedback. Remember that. So with all that being said, let's talk about how financial concerns play into all this. Because money is an important consideration. We want to make sure we're using our resources responsibly and not wastefully. So I'm going to change how you think about money. At least I'm going to try. You can tell me whether or not you think I'm succeeding. But really, money is just a tool of measurement. We can even think of money itself as an information technology that was invented by people and can be reinvented by people, because the design of a technology can always be improved. And so it's important to ask ourselves, is this technology's current design adequately meeting our needs? Because I've heard a lot of people talk about how they want to invest their money, but like, time and energy is also an investment? And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather invest my time and energy in people rather than in money. Because I think watching people grow and develop is a lot more interesting and more personally fulfilling than watching numbers in a bank account grow. Besides, remember, the more people get their own needs met, the more they'll have the capacity to help meet other people's needs. That's a really valuable return on investment. Because money can only motivate people so much. But give a person work to do that feels meaningful and fulfilling to them, and is within their capacity to do sustainably, that makes them feel valued for who they are as a person. That's the kind of thing that gets people to put real passion and energy into their work, and to really care about doing that work well. Again, assuming they're getting their own needs met. Because it's hard to have a lot of passion or energy for anything when you're barely surviving. But if we make it a priority to take care of each other, and to invest our time and energy and resources in each other, we're all going to be able to do much better work. Especially if we get to have choices about when and where and how we do that work. So what's stopping us? I don't know. Maybe it's just that change is hard. I mean, I'm an autistic person. I get that change is hard. You get used to the rules being one way, and then people go and change the rules on you, and it totally disrupts your entire reality and messes up your whole way of doing things. Believe me, I know the feeling. But sometimes change is necessary. Sometimes the way things are really isn't working for anybody, and we gotta figure out how to come up with something different. So what if we changed the rules of the game of money? What if we made it more of a cooperative game, where the objective isn't so much to compete with one another to get the highest score, but a different goal, something we could all work together toward? So like I said, money can be used as a measuring tool, but our real goal should be making sure labor and resources are being used as sustainably and efficiently as possible to meet the needs of as many people as possible. And that means money can't be our only criteria, because we need more than just numerical data. We're going to need a lot of qualitative feedback from a lot of different kinds of people and communities. And that means making sure they have plenty of opportunities to make their stories and their perspectives heard. Because that's the only way to know what problems people are really having, so we can understand where that overall flow of labor and resources might be getting stopped up or slowed down, and who those resources aren't reaching. And we need to keep seeking this information on an ongoing basis, because conditions and circumstances are changing all the time, and you never know what old problems might suddenly get solved, or what new problems might suddenly come up. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned as an autistic person, it's that life is unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. So, who can help us change the game? Who can help make sure we've got a system of rules that actually works for everybody? Well, not to brag about my own field too much, but information scientists and librarians can totally help. Because like I said before, money is basically an information technology, and librarians know a lot about how to organize information and resources to help meet people's needs. But we've all got different kinds of knowledge and skills that are all important and useful. Even those of us who feel like all we can do is just survive from day to day, and we don't really have time or energy left for anything else. That work's important too. The work you do to keep yourself alive is important. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Your existence is valuable, no matter what. And by the way, disabled people have already been working on changing the game for years. I mean, just come see what we've been doing. These are just some of the ideas and conversations we've been having, as different disabled people have been working together to build community and culture together in different times and places and circumstances. Don't underestimate us. We might have limited physical or mental abilities, but a lot of us have been learning how to use the abilities we do have to make big things happen. So just watch. I bet you disabled people are going to save the world. See if we don't. So here's one final thought I want to leave you with. You know that whole idea of from each according to their abilities to each according to their needs? Where everybody gives whatever they're capable of giving and receives whatever it is they need? It's an idea that a lot of people are scared of, because they're like, that's socialism, that's communism, we can't have that. But really, if you think about it, this is just a design problem. I mean, we can solve a design problem, can't we? If we keep working at it, figure out what's working and what's not working for different people in different situations. Do some iterative user testing to figure out where people are having difficulties and running into roadblocks. Find out where we need to improve, come up with a new design and see if that one works better. Maybe we just need to do some more trial and error experimentation. I mean, that's how science works. That's how learning works. Sometimes you just have to take chances and make mistakes and get messy, yeah? And then maybe you have to clean up the mess afterward. But hopefully you at least learned how to not make as big of a mess next time. Because developing new knowledge and skills takes practice. And sometimes you're going to be bad at something before you learn how to get good at it. Right? That's how this works, right? Anyway, here's more on me and my background. Things I've studied, things I'm currently studying. Because I've been doing all I can to get the education I need to really become a caring professional. Somebody who knows how to use information and technology to help meet real people's real needs. But you know, I can't do this work all on my own. Nobody can. We have to be committed to creating a more caring culture together. That's the only way this is going to work. Okay? Okay. I'll see you all later.